Hey guys, it's Lane here with Hobbies and Man. Once again, today we're doing another book review. Today we're looking at Kraken Rider Z, written by David Estes and Dirk Ashton. Now, I don't really know how they divided the effort there. You know, is it, David Estes came up with the idea, Dirk Ashton executed it? Is it that they do it together? I'm not really sure. But either way, they both work on it. Although I've mostly seen Dirk Ashton be the one that pushes this book around and tries to get it bought, right? But I might not be correct about that. So who knows, right? Either way, both of these guys did a good job with this book. I really enjoyed it. So it's a self-published book. It's published on Amazon. And the second book comes out in January, or maybe February. I think it's January. And I recommend you guys read this over the break. I think it's a very nice book, and it's really fun and enjoyable. And it has a nice kind of, not quite summery vibe, but there's a lot of beaches and water and, water-based stuff. So it feels almost summery. And it might be good to read over, the winter break, right? So I recommend it. Demographic-wise, I would say that this is a YA, because I think most progression and cultivation type novels and game lit novels that aren't directly associated with like the harem lit genre are, broadly speaking, accessible for YA audiences. The character also is like a young teen-ish kind of guy, and he doesn't grow to be like a proper adult throughout this book. And it's also kind of set in like a high school, college kind of, academy type thing. So I think this is probably YA. Although if you told me it was adult, I believe you. I just don't necessarily think that it's the way I would define it, right? And genre-wise, this is epic fantasy. This is a cultivation story. And I guess you can call it like a progression fantasy, because that's more or less the same as saying it's a cultivation story. But I don't know if it has enough game elements to it that it's a game-lit story, right? Like, there is no proper game in this, but it's a lot more like direct than like Cradle, right? And Cradle, I think, is like the epitome of like a cultivation type novel. And this feels a bit more gamified than that. So I'm not really sure what the genre is, so we'll just go with progression fantasy overall, right? It does not have an adaptation. I think this would be an amazing TV show or movie in the vein of like How to Train Your Dragon, or what is it? Is it Dragon Knight, the Netflix show that is really popular? I can't remember what it's called. But it has that kind of vibe, and I think it'd be awesome as an animated show. Although the reality of animation and the fact that it would require this book to be very, very popular in some way means that it's pretty unlikely. Although I would like to see it that way, right? And ratings-wise, it's a 4.5 out of 5 for me. I think it's nearly perfect. I really, really enjoyed it. There are some slight issues that I have with it that we'll go over throughout the time that I explain this. So, yeah, that's it for the book facts. In terms of premise, this is basically a journey through the childhood and then young adulthood of a young man who dreams of being a dragon knight, right? Or a dragon rider. And through the circumstances of his life, he ends up actually bonding with a Kraken instead. And so now he has to learn how to deal with this and the reality of his life now that he has kind of stumbled into some sort of very meaningful and very important stuff going on, right? So the best way I can word this, or the best way I can kind of give you an idea about what this book is about, is Naomi Novik's Temeraire, but in a proper fantasy setting. Because Naomi Novik's Temeraire series is about the Napoleonic Wars with dragons, and a lot of it is spent between a character and a dragon bonding and becoming friends, and then developing their ability to work together to fight enemies and to go to war. And it's set in like a relatively realistic kind of world, right? Whereas this is properly medieval fantasy type stuff, with that same kind of system of like a character and a dragon, or well, in this case, a Kraken, trying to find a way to interact with each other and to grow together as a unit, right? And if you like Naomi Novik's Temeraire, I recommend you read this. It's really, really fun. So that's it for the premise. In terms of plotline here, we open up with a prologue first, And the prologue opens with a battle. We get to meet these characters called Drogo and Mogon, who are sorcerers, which is a special name for a class of fighter, although it's not really clear what the significance is until the end of the book. And they're at war with this place called the Lufto Empire, which I'm guessing is like German, like the German equivalent, right, of this kingdom. And this would be more like French, I guess, maybe something like that. And they're at war with this empire. They're in this big battle, and they have to sacrifice themselves to win. And it's this very crazy situation. It changes the landscape. It affects the way that this place is, and it changes the perspective that people have on this dragon rider and his dragon. Although we don't get to learn about that until later. So that's the prologue. It's very exciting and very interesting, but there's a lot of data sent at you, a lot of information about these characters and what they are and what they stand for and like what they do. And the thing is that most of that stuff is like specific words for this world. And so you actually don't end up being all that interested. You actually end up being kind of confused. And so I think that's probably the weakest part of this book. After that, we start with part 1. It's 80 years after the prologue, and we get to see a 7-year-old boy. His name is Z, and he's riding a pig called Midge. They go to the beach, and they see a pair of dragon knights flying across the ocean in front of them. And then they wave at them, and the dragon knights do something to show off for the kid. And he's very excited about this. At the beach, he's combing through it, trying to find resources that he can use and he can take back to his mom so that they can have more to eat. And while he's there, he finds a pair of little creatures. They look like octopi or squid, but he doesn't know what they are. And only one of them survives. And so Z calls it Jessup, and this becomes Jessup the Kraken over time, right? And they quickly become best friends, mostly because Jessup is more intelligent than you would expect, and Z doesn't have any other friends. He has no human interaction beyond his parents because they just live really far away from the town. And the creature learns to speak, and Z gets a little scale on his chest. He doesn't know what it is, but he gets like a weird situation, a little weird thing on his chest that's kind of hard and gray, and it's similar to the shell on Jessup. And 3 weeks after meeting Jessup, Z and his dad, Jad Taro, have to go to town, this place called Mon Tortuga, to trade. Once they're there, Z meets this woman called Dame Tombsill and her squire, Tem Briggs, and they eat together. Z asks her a lot of questions about the Dragon Knights, and at this point, Z asks if he can get into the academy. And, well, the reality is that he really probably wouldn't be able to get into the academy because he is of a very low station, and getting into the academy is a very expensive endeavor. But Dame Tombsill decides that it's better to keep the hope alive in this young child, and so she tells him about the reality, but the fact that it is possible for him to go there. It would just take a very extraordinary set of circumstances. And this is very meaningful to Z. He's very happy about this. He understands the difficulty because he might be a small child, but he is aware of the reality of life. But he's happy to know that there is a possibility, that there is some way that he might be able to do it, right? Then, as he's going through town, Z learns what a Kraken looks like, and he's kind of concerned that it looks like Jessup. And he has to tell his family about it. Jad, being a good person and knowing that he has to do the right thing, even though it conflicts with the fact that it's going to hurt his child, he decides to report the Kraken to the guy that works at the town, right, the mayor of the town. And this ends up escalating when the Lord of the Realm, the Lord of the area, hears about the fact that there's a Kraken. And so now Z has to find a way to free Jessup, who's been caught, and he feels it. He knows through like telepathy or some sort of sympathetic bond that they have that Jessup has been taken. And so Z runs to save him with the help of Midge. They get into a bit of a scuffle, and this ends up with Z being thrown into the ocean. When he is thrown into the ocean, his heritage is revealed. It turns out that Z's complications in life were actually due to the fact that his mother had kept him from the water, because he's actually a merman, or a merboy in this case. And now that his heritage has been proven, he is suddenly much stronger than before. He no longer has a rash. He no longer has any breathing issues. And he has been revealed to be this creature that the humans in this place fear and find to be kind of grotesque, because he is like a fish boy, right? And so he is conscripted to work in the the HMT Kraken fish, His Majesty's trading vessel Kraken fish. And so his father is punished, and Z is mad at his father, but also sad. He's taken to the ship. He's looked over by the ship's doctor, who becomes his friend and mentor. And Z is fitted for chains because he is no longer human. He is now a slave. And elsewhere, Jessup bides his time to come back for Z eventually. Part 2 starts at this point. It's 10 years after Z has been taken. And Z is now basically a grown man. I mean, he's 18-ish. And the surgeon, whose name is Drawl Tar Ainig, has written a letter to the academy telling them, hey, there is this merboy, he's special, please come look at him. And it opens up with Z getting ready to dive to scrub the Kraken fish's whole, because he's basically the only person that can do this relatively safely and efficiently. Suddenly there's a sea dragon, which is just a big snake, that attacks, and Z is the main target for some reason. The ship is hit, a portion of it breaks, and Z is freed from the chains that were holding him and is attacked again. Suddenly, a storm brews in the sky, thunder, and then a roar happens. And at this point is when Jessup arrives back to save his friend, as his friend had once saved him. And he saves Z, he kills the sea dragon, and then he brings Z up to the surgeon to get him some help, to get Z healed. And he is in a terrible condition. The doctor sends for eels, other creatures of the sea. And at this point, he does some weird magic that we don't understand. There's a concerning red glow to the magic. And Z's life is returned to him. It basically is a life transfer from the eels to Z. And later, when Z wakes, the academy has shown up to accept a squire into the training program. But actually, they've shown up to see Z, to see what's going on with him. What is he? Why is he friends with a Kraken? And what the hell? Krakens exist. They thought they were a myth, right? And so they bring Z and Jessup with them. Z and Jessup catch up. They get to meet the commander of the academy, whose name is Ariosa, and they talk about the bond. Humans bond with dragons, and apparently mermen bond with Krakens. Now, I wonder if there is a chance for a merman to bond with a dragon, or if they're like mutually exclusive bondings, right? So Z can't be a dragon rider, but he can definitely be a Kraken rider. So he asks Jessup, and they agree. And so they finally say their goodbyes to the people at the ship, who didn't like Z, but some of them at least respected him because he had saved their lives at some point, right? And so they go off to the academy. Z and Jessup experiment with their abilities on the way there. They're attacked by orcapods, which are orca squid, amalgamations, and they're kind of horrifying. And they eventually arrive. And it turns out that the cadets have recently also arrived. They're getting ready to start basic training. And bam, suddenly a Kraken and a merman has shown up to their training, and it's kind of weird. But Z is not allowed to train with them. He is not going to be a cadet. He is just there for observation, basically. They want to know what the hell is up with him, right? And what the heck he is. And so at this point, we get introduced to Salison and Baktu, or Batku, who's a cadet. And it turns out that she is some sort of special character. She's going to be like the main female character that we follow throughout the story, but she doesn't really get too much going on for her here. We also get introduced to Mithir Wanchu. So Ariosa is the military leader of the academy, and then Wanchu is the academic leader of the academy. And then we learn about the superintendent, whose name is Laura Hughes, and we meet Philium Tucker, and we get to see that Dame Tumsil and Tem Briggs are also here. And then we get introduced to Kareem Mahfouz, who is the Beastmaster, and Mildrazad, who is his dragon. And it's a male character and a female dragon. And he's a fun guy, and he wants to learn about Jessup and Z a lot because he's never seen them before. He doesn't know what a merman and a kraken are like. Then we have some political situations happening at this point. We get to see Ariosa meeting with the school leadership. He makes a case for Z and Jessup's enrollment, but he is not listened to properly. So basically he argues Tosh, the kingdom that they're from, its military power wanes, and Krakens and their riders are an untapped resource if they can find more of them. But in order to do that, they have to at least train one of them successfully first. And we get introduced to these characters called the Wraiths, who are basically the villains for the story. They're this pirate force that uses nebulous magic to threaten Tosh. We come back to the boys at this point. Z has no land legs. He hasn't been on land in 10 years, and he has to get used to it again. And he gets to meet Salison at this point. Then we get Ariosa. He returns. He goes and talks to Jessup and Z, and he tells them, "You have not been accepted into the academy, but you will be hired as contractors on the island so that we can keep you here." And he will give them training on the side. He will try to help them gain skills and abilities so that they can continue to be meaningful members of the academy in some way, right? So they're given room and board, and they're also given a wage. Z and Jessup get to live in Kareem's beach house for a while until they get some barracks made for them, and they finally get to relax a little bit. Z finds that Dr. Anig gave him a merman book, but he doesn't know how to read it. At this point, part 2 has ended, and part 3 starts. And this opens up with a lot of training. Jessup and Z now work at the docks. They have a 5-day work week, kind of like how we do here in the States, and they get pretty good pay. Mildrezad and Kareem come by to get the boys to their new quarters. It's a small cove under the cadet branches, and it's actually explained to them that, it's kind of weird because all of these coves exist in the same cadet barracks, but they've never been in use, or they haven't been in use in a long time. It's just kind of odd that they exist there. And my understanding of this is that there used to be Kraken writers that also attended the academy or that lived here, but for whatever reason, it has been hidden away or it has been lost information, right? Then they're met by Ariosa and Wanchu, who explain the bonding ceremony, or like the way that they connect. They explain forging and the crucible and core and Imperium and what it is, which is basically just magic. Imperium is something that you have to cultivate, and then through cultivating, you gain a magical core. From there, you're able to use this magical core for different things, right? You get levels and classes, and the different levels and classes are sand, tin, lead, copper, bronze, then iron, then silver, then gold. Then there's 3 Titan classes, and each of the classes has 3 different levels to it, right? So it's like, sand level 1, sand level 2, sand level 3, and then you get up to tin. And sand is actually more or less like the starter level, right? Everyone is sand until they get a bond, and then they become tin when they're bonded, right? And so the boys meditate, they find their crucible, they reveal it, and then they find Merizian, which is not the same as Empyrean. It's like the opposite force. If Empyrean is like fire, Merizian is water, if that makes sense. And they're invited to combat training to see a showcase, right? And it's very cool, but it's not super important plot-wise. Like, there really isn't too much going on here, except for showing us how dragon riders train against each other, doing these combat events where they don't actually die. So that's pretty cool. We get to see Salison's point of view for a bit at this point. We get introduced to the orb, which is the way in which you can learn what your class is. And Tem decides to be more friendly towards Z and Jessup because he's grown up a bit and he's not a shitty person anymore, because he was really shitty when we met him at the beginning of the story. He also explains class advancement to them, the way that it happens, not necessarily what it means, because we already know that at that point. Then after the combat showcase is over, the boys head home. They find some notes left to them to learn how to forge, and it's basically just cultivation. They manage it eventually, even though it's pretty hard for them initially. Then they flare their core, and it's successful. So now they are, an active bonded pair. Then they activate their keep, which is hammer space. They can hide things in it. and then they start developing their abilities. A few days later, they figure out that the Merfolk book is water activated, so they have to read it underwater basically, and they learn how to mine Merizian, which is what cultivation is called, right? Mining is the word for cultivation in this book. And then Z has a run-in with some asshole cadets. They mine Empyrean and Merizian together, which is a very different kind of concept that no one has really done before. And they become training fiends. They go crazy. They train, and then they eventually end up meeting Phoenix, who is a club-footed ice diver dragon, who is a cadet who's trying to find himself a bonded pairing, but he has basically tried the what's called the basic training twice already. This is his last opportunity to do so, and if he doesn't succeed this time, he will no longer be allowed into the academy. And they become fast friends with him because he is a bit of an outcast the same way they are, right? And he decides to start training with them, and they become friends. Tem and his dragon Timandra also show up to train with them, and they learn some new abilities through it. They learn how to camouflage and how to occlude. They learn push and burst and deflect and shield. And then Tem shares Dame Toomzil's past with them, and it affects them because Dame Toomzil was also kind of like someone that wasn't really the right type of person to make it into the academy. She was a daughter of a nobleman and a normal woman, a peasant, and so her social standing was pretty low. Somehow she managed to gather the money, I think through the death of one of her family members, and she was able to become a dragon rider. And so she has a lot of respect for peasants and people of lower classes. And when she met Z, she took that to mean that she had to teach Tem the same respect, and he finally has some. So it's very meaningful, and I really enjoyed the story quite a lot. At this point, we get to see that the characters have been summoned to do some sea-based training, and the students mess up, and they have a crash, and they all fall to the ocean. At this point, Z and Jessup manage to save them, and so they become a bit more important and a bit more accepted because they have shown that they're useful and that they're not dangerous, right? Or at least not particularly dangerous to fellow dragon riders that they're friendly with, right? Z and his co-workers go to celebrate. Then a different day comes, and Z is requested to work as a lifeguard for some swimming training that the cadets have to go through. And it turns out that it's actually kind of a way to get him in trouble because they're attacked by this giant crab monster that has special magic runes engraved into it that are not good. They're from a third magic system, and no one knows how they got there, but it seems clear that someone did it to set up Z as the perpetrator, and it didn't work. So Z managed to save most of the characters, and then he gets blamed for it anyways, and it's a bit of a problem for Z. In a different situation, Phoenix and Z go for a joyride. They get attacked by Lucas Tarzian, and Salison sees what's going on, and the boys manage to get help just in the nick of time before they get killed, basically. They manage to escape, but they still get in trouble. And Z and Jessup are given 30 days in jail, and Lucas and his friends are given 15 days because there's favoritism. Z manages to gain their respect because he starts training while he's in jail. And eventually he's moved out and then gets conscripted to a special mission to help the king save his son from raids. And this is the end of part 3. Part 4 starts at this point, and it's basically the culmination of everything. The first 3 parts were mostly just to set up all of these characters, set up all of these abilities, and part 4 is the execution of something, right? So the boys get situated, they get measured for armor, and then they get harnesses, and they get to meet this team of special marines called the Shields, like SEALs, the SEAL team, the SHIELD team, sorry, and they got a lot of training in. Neither of them managed to really learn how to control their abilities yet. So they have a lightning bolt attack and a lightning blast attack, and neither of them are landing properly. And so Ariosa and Wanchu decide to tell them to visualize it differently, right? They're trying to like spin and aim, kind of like the Flash. They tell them, hey, maybe you should visualize it differently. Maybe you're casting a line and trying to create a connection between you and this other thing, right? And when they do that, they manage to finally connect with the target, right? They basically had to find a way to visualize grounding lightning, right? So they had to kind of think of it as casting a line and then using that line to guide the lightning, right? And it works, and it's very, very nice. They get 5 days of training in this way, and then they start doing simulated combat. The first match is against the Silver Knight. It ends actually pretty quickly, and the boys win. Then they fight a gold class, and the Kraken manages to grapple the dragon. And after the guy doesn't yield, Z and Jessup just kill him. The knight advances, and then this helps make the training much more appealing to other people. And so more and more people want to fight against Jessup and Z. Eventually, we learn that Jessup's anger calls storms, and the boys get a new ability called Water Spout. They also get Fusillade, which is a kind of like thunder, what's it called? Kind of like a thunder Gatling gun, right? They can shoot a bunch of attacks at once. They get Water Shield, and they learn how to do tracking at this point. Later, they finally lose a battle against a trio of attackers. So they had to fight a silver, a gold, and a white Titan trio, and they finally lose because the odds are super stacked against them, right? They start adding sea battles into the mix now, and then the boys learn the Vortex ability, which is kind of like a tsunami or like a hurricane or something. And then they get a draw at this point by hiding. Ariosa and Wanshu then decide that they have to fight Z, and they have to find a way to totally annihilate them in order to show them that they're not going to always be able to win. The thing is that they actually don't lose. They survive the initial attack, and then they lose after that, right? So it's not entirely utter annihilation. It's like nearly utter annihilation. But basically, it still shows the point that the boys are strong, but they're not always going to be the strongest, right? And then eventually the mission has to start. And so they get ready. Wanshu gives them a special pill that might help them, in a very severe case. And this is foreshadowing for later. Wanshu manages to cloak the entire task force, and the boys get their saddle and their armor, which is really, really cool. And then the mission properly starts at this point. The boys in the shield team have very little trouble initially. They're 300 yards out from the ships that they're attacking when suddenly they see some weird kelp. And it turns out that this is actually an attack. It's a type of clam monster. The boys manage to kill it, but it actually kills a lot of the shield team, which is very, very bad. Eventually, Z and Jessup decide to take over the mission because they're the only ones that can really do anything about this. And Z gets on the ship, he touches a body, and it wakes up. And it seems like there's undead on the ship. And then Z assassinates like 10 wraiths in one go. He manages to save the prince, and then his dragon as well. Jessup breaks in and destroys the hull of the ship. And Z, the prince, and the dragon manage to get out. Then these weird birds with people on them start chasing them, and finally the dragon core shows up. And they manage to properly execute the rescue, but at this point, this weird red power shows up and enhances the unbonded people that they're fighting with, or against, right, all of the wraiths. And Z has to fight some people, he has to drown them, and they finally manage to save the prince. They get him on the platform and back to the ship. And the king and his forces attack, and they destroy the wraiths. However, this is not the win that they were expecting. Because as soon as it seems like Tosh is winning, a chill comes barreling through, then a fog, and then suddenly more wraiths appear. And then they start pincering Tosh forces. And suddenly a necromantic dragon shows up in a rag-covered man. It turns out that this guy is a sorcerer, and he's stronger than the 3 red titans that are available on the field. And this is when Jessup and Z have to decide to fight. They zap the Wraith General. It hurts him, which is very surprising. And then it talks to them via telepathy, which is something unexpected. I didn't think that there was telepathy that could happen across different characters. I thought it was only within the bond, right? And they have a good exchange with him in terms of like fighting. The boys decide to take a breather, and then their core is depleted, and they have to use it to control a shield for their friends. At this point, the boys understand that they're sorcerers, and they have to take the pill to get more energy from their core, right? they get this massive boost. Jessup is revealed to be a thunder kraken, and when the pill is swallowed, a massive burst of light shoots out of them, and Z manages to control this attack by thinking of enemies and only targeting them. And the thing is that because he's thinking of enemies, it targets all of the raids, and then some of the people that you would assume would not be enemies, but that Z has negative feelings for. And so he hurts some of the people on their own side, but it's kind of deserved, right? Maybe this is, you can argue that this is like a higher, being guiding them or something. All the raids fall from the sky. The Necro Dragon manages to steal a bit of Jessup's arm and survive the attack. And then the fog opens and all of the things within are taken back. They are sucked back into wherever it is that they came from. And at this point, Jessup and Z fall unconscious. Then we finally get to wrap up the story here. So days later, Z and Jessup are awake and relatively well. They get to the deck and they're saluted by the entire task force. The king tells them that they can't get public credit, but he's going to give them all of the things that they need. So he gives them executive orders to make it so that they can start, the academy properly. He gives them a stipend, a lifetime stipend, and the boys ask for it to be sent to his parents. And they want no special treatment, and they want a full assessment, and that's all done for them. Tarzian decides to forgive the boys and tells them that his son is shitty, and that he hopes that they will forgive him. And then Salison gets a message at this point from someone that we don't know the identity of. And finally, the boys are back at the academy. They get assessed by a yellow light. They are told they have a second year core. I can't remember the level associated with that. Then it awakens again. It recalibrates. It releases a blue light. It gives them a higher level at this point, fourth year. Then it recalibrates again and reassesses. And it tells them that they're iron. And they're sorcerers, and they have unlimited potential. And this is crazy because this is like basically they're godlike characters at this point compared to everyone else. And the story ends here. We have an epilogue where we get to see the captain, Bomba, is told by Aenig that he's going to leave, that he's going to go somewhere else. And then we get thrown back to the to the Thero homestead, and a dragon flies in. It's a courier, and he asks them if they're Jed and Sela Taro. They say yes, and he gives them a bag of coins and a letter, and he reads it to them. And the family is surprised that their son is still alive, that he still remembers them and loves them, and they cry and are super happy. And this was a great ending to the story. I really, really enjoyed this book. It was so great. I loved it. Characters wise, we get introduced to Z Taro, who is a secret merman child, and Jessup the Thunder Kraken. We learn about Mitch the pig, and Jad and Sela Taro, who are his parents, adoptive. They found him one day when he kind of just came out of the ocean, and they decided to adopt him. And Sela knows enough about the human body and plants and stuff to make sure that he would never touch the water, or at least never submerge himself in water, and to keep him from having the worst, side effects of never touching water. So he had this crazy rash, and his mom was able to give him ointments and stuff to minimize it. And so there's something more to Jad and Sela, but we don't know what it is yet. We get to meet Dame Tombzil, who's the first Dragon Knight we meet in the story, and Tem Briggs, who's her squire, and later becomes an older brother figure to Z. We have Ariosa and Wanshu and Dr. Egnig, who are mentors. Dr. Egnig is the doctor of the ship that Z was a slave in. And Ariosa is the commander of the academy, and Wanshu is the academic dean. We get to meet Lucas Tarzian, who is an asshole character, although I'm sure that he'll eventually become some sort of antagonistic rival. We get to meet Phoenix, who is a cool dragon guy, and Salison Batku, who is our female character, and I'm guessing she's going to be the love interest. We get to meet King Fawn and Prince Fawn and Kareem and Mildrizad, and the necromantic dragon and its lord, and we don't know who that is. Although I'm having a guess here, which is that it's some sort of ghoul or ghost leftover of Drogo and Mogon, because I don't know what else it could be. Although, it might be something else, but that seems very interesting and cool. And in terms of world building, I would consider this a One Piece style world. It's mostly islands and water world kind of a situation. It has a Temeraire style power system. or actually it has a Temeraire style dragon system, and it has a cradle style cultivation system. It has humans and dragons bonding via Zephyr, the god, and Empyrean, his force. And Zephyr is kind of like Jupiter. He is the sun god element kind of character. And there's also this character called Postune, who is like Poseidon, but it's actually a woman in this case, who also exists. And she is the person that allows Merman and Kraken to bond through Merizian. And for whatever reason, Z manages to cultivate both Merizian and Empyrean. And that's special. That's weird. That's something that no one else can do. We get to learn about Tosh, the kingdom that they live in. The Wraith Pirates recently started acting out against them. And it seems like Zephyr's power has grown weaker. Maybe that's because it's overused, or maybe it's because another character or another entity, maybe the third version, right? Like if Zephyr and Postune are Jupiter and Neptune, or Poseidon and Zeus, maybe there's a third character who's Hades, who's the one that has the red magic power. And they're gaining power by stealing Zephyr's, right? I'm not really sure. And there's a lot of Avatar in the Last Airbender style animals, right? These weird animal amalgamations. The most important world building aspect here is the idea that humans have decided a while back, the Church of Humanity or whatever, decided that they don't want a binary god system. They only want Zephyr. And so this means that Postune, the sea god, is relegated to being a lesser deity, and also basically to heresy. If you swear by Postune instead of Jupiter, you are a problem, right? The thing is that this is a water world, and most people that are on the water pray to Postune instead of Jupiter because it makes more sense, right? But they do it in secret, so it's kind of interesting. In terms of artwork and fan service, there's no fan service. You know, there's no naked women, or there's no sexual content or anything like that. There's no artwork inside the book, although I would love to see some artwork at some point. However, the cover is awesome. I really, really like it. Now, although it's kind of unclear what way Jessup actually looks, because in the cover he just looks like a giant squid, right? But in the book, he has a mouth somewhere on his face, not on his beak. Like, he doesn't have a beak, and then he uses that as his mouth. He has like a physical mouth that is like rubbery and has lips and everything. And so I'm not sure what that looks like. That's concerning. It actually kind of sounds creepier and nastier than it really should be, but it's kind of unclear what he actually looks like. So I would like to know that at some point. Ratings wise, it's a 4.5 out of 5. I think it's nearly perfect, but I have some slight issues here and there. So first of all, there was some spelling and editing problems. Maybe that's because there's two different creators working on this, and so whoever typed it had a different editing system than the other one or something. I'm not really sure. But there's a bit of a weakness in the writing at certain points, and it's not great. The prologue is very clunky. The world building is very minimal for most of the time. However, when stuff is explained, it's clear. It takes a long time to get there, to get to any meaningful world building, and I don't necessarily love that, because you made us really confused at the beginning of the story with the clunky prologue, right? All of the different terms and stuff were thrown at us, and the fact that we don't learn what those are until much later, while making sense in terms of like when the characters would be able to learn about them, makes it kind of annoying from a reader perspective, because I have all of these questions that have no answers, that don't seem like they're ever going to be answered. And that's not actually exciting or useful to getting me to read more. It's actually just frustrating and not useful, because I might just drop the book because you're not giving me answers instead of waiting until I get them, right? So I think that maybe that's a bit too annoying there. And I think that there's a lot of terms that are used that don't really have a clear difference, right? So there's abilities and attacks and skills, and they all seem to mean the same thing. And then there's crucible and core. And I don't understand the difference between the two. Like, your core is obviously like the core of your body, but then your crucible is like the core inside your core or something like that. Like, it's just very unclear. There's too many words for the same thing. And again, this might be because there's two authors. I'm not really sure. And again, another issue that I have is, why does Jessup have like a physical mouth? Like, is he like a One Piece character? Like, like Hachi or something? Or is he like a proper, Kraken? And then he has like a part of his shell that he can act like it's his mouth, so he can look like he's smiling and stuff. I'm not really sure. It's a bit concerning that that's kind of unclear, but it's not that big of a deal. Overall, I really, really enjoyed this book. I really loved it. I already pre-ordered the second book, even though it's a bit expensive for my taste, because I just enjoy this much. I enjoyed this book that much, and I think that these creators deserve some of my money, right? They deserve to get some of the proceeds that they deserve for their book, right? For the work. So I didn't mind that it was kind of expensive. If I remember correctly, I got the first book for like 99 cents anyway, so paying full price for the second one is not a big deal. It averages out to like both of them being on discount, right? So yeah, overall, great stuff. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Let me know what you thought. Thank you guys very much for watching, and see you guys later.